friends, it's Deanna Willison with Our Blooming Catholic Life. My apologies. 11 months ago, I did a book review of this, really superficial, meant to come back to it. I've been in this book off and on, honestly, over the last 11 months, quite a bit, and didn't remember that I was going to come back and do this. My apologies. Always call me out on that. I'll come back and do it, whatever I said I do. In this case, it's give a more in-depth review of this book. I'm watched some of the other review. I'm not going to try and duplicate it. I'm going to try and address it. Last time we really looked just at the section of the Beatitudes. So what is this book? It was written when he was Joseph Ratzinger, but we know him better now as Pope Benedict XVI. It is on Jesus of Nazareth. This particular edition is from the baptism in the Jordan to the Transfiguration. There are other time periods as well. This one is published by Ignatius Books, as I believe they all are. This book has gained such wild popularity, and it really explains a lot about Pope Benedict. It's great to get in here and read. This particular paperback edition by Ignatius Press was 2008, but it was originally copyrighted in 2007. The table of contents is not set up at all how I'd like. I don't even understand this giant gap here. What's this about? You could have just made this in bold or bigger. I'd prefer the ... dots, right? There's no use to have italics. It would be easier to read if these were bold and these were regular print. Italics can be so hard for some people to read. You really need to consider how you use that. So what is in italics? It is the Roman numeral sections, the abbreviations, the publisher's note, and the foreword. Then we have introduction. See, introduction should be bigger or bolder because there's things under introduction, right? Introduction, and then it gives the title of it. I don't know why they bother saying that. It says an initial reflection. You could have just left that go. You don't have to also say it's the introduction. Chapter 1 is the baptism of Jesus. Chapter 2, the temptation of Jesus. Chapter 3, the gospel of the kingdom of God. Chapter 4, the Sermon on the Mount. And here's where it gets weird. Had these things been bolded, these wouldn't have to be so crazy tiny down here. In chapter 4, the Sermon on the Mount, this is the one that gets smaller. It has the Beatitudes. It has the Torah of the Messiah. And then under that, in italics, they have quotes. You've heard that it was said ... but I say to you. Next is the dispute concerning the Sabbath. The fourth commandment, the family, the people, and the community of Jesus' disciples. And then compromise and the people's radicalism. Yes. Chapter 5, again, I wish, where's it at? See, it's hard to see. Chapter 5, maybe, if that's bolded, that's the weakest bolding I've ever seen, and you can see there are a number of subheadings, which would be easier if it was bolded. And for some reason, for these little tiny ones, the page number is right after it, but for the whole chapter, it's over here with no ... dots. I don't know. These are weird choices to me. So chapter 5 is on the Lord's Prayer, and it breaks it down, much like our friend, wherever it is here, the Catechism of the Council of Trent. I can't see it behind me, so it must be sitting here around me somewhere. But it does it kind of line by line. The petitions, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Chapter 6 is the disciples with no subheadings. Chapter 7 is the message of the parables. And this is, again, going to have those tiny subheadings. So the nature and purpose of the parables, 3 major parables from the Gospel of Luke, which are the Good Samaritan, the parable of the 2 brothers, in parentheses, the prodigal son and the son who remained at home, close parentheses, and the good father. 3, the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, which to the day I'm filming, this was actually the gospel for the day. So again, you can see, it gets really tiny there as we get down to those. Then we have chapter 8, the principal images of John's gospel. And under that, oddly, we have an introduction, the Johannine question. And then the principal Johannine images, again in tiny italics, water, vine and wine, bread and the shepherd. Chapter 9 is 2 milestones on Jesus' way, Peter's confession and the Transfiguration, and then each of those are subheadings. Peter's confession and the Transfigurations. I don't want to ruin it for you. Chapter 10 is Jesus declares his identity. The first one is the Son of Man, then the Son, then I am. And then we have in italics again, glossary, bibliography, and index. Again, the use of the different font styles was a little odd there. Then we have here the list of abbreviations, which is fairly tiny. It gives you for the books of the Bible, and then as well, ATD is Das Alte Testament Deutsch. It's a famous commentary in German on the Old Testament. Then there's CSEL, Corpus Scriptorum Ecclesiasticorum Latinorum, from Vienna in 1866, like the more famous Patrolia Latina. It's a collection of Christian sources in Latin. The PG, the Patrologia Graecia. It is done in Paris, 1857 to 1866, a collection of ancient Christian sources in Greek. There is the RGG, De Religionem in Gesteck and Gegenwart. It is from 1909 to 1913. There's multiple editions here. Some articles were contributed to this last edition by the young Professor Ratzinger. And TDNT, Theological Dictionary of the New Testament, which was published in 1964 to 1976. You can see it gets really small with those, but those are some additional abbreviations. The ones for the books of the Bible are in multiple, like 2 columns per page. Not a great space here. It's almost the same space here as it is between the abbreviation and its book. So a line through there or a bigger space there would have been helpful. Those are just some technical things. And these are very small. So you may want to go back and I would definitely look at these before you start. And these ones especially you may want to highlight. They could have been bolded so they jumped out at you more, but you may want to highlight them. Again, because there's no separation here, using a highlighter or some way of marking this column from this, you could just draw that line in, easy peasy. Would make that easier to see. Yeah, I know a lot of my commentary is on the layout of this book. It has really hefty page margins. And once you get into the book, the text is not bad to see. It's really that introductory section that makes it difficult. We're going to jump back and look at the features in the back quick. The page numbers are in the center bottom, which is in a book to indicate that they want you to read it sequentially. That's not how I use the book. And it makes it difficult because as well, this up here, Pope Benedict XVI, Jesus of Nazareth, the title of the book. So there's no subheadings up here at all, and the page numbers are in the middle of the bottom of the page, which make them harder to see. And so you're going to have to pay attention and really look up where you're going. If you're reading it sequentially, no problem, move a bookmark. But if you're looking for a particular passage, yeah, this is a book that's going to end up, I will probably end up annotating it a little bit more. I've been leery of writing in this particular book, but I think I may put some of the subheadings when they happen, when there's a new chapter or something, in the upper corners of the book. I'm looking through, and it's see the Beatitudes. It's so discreet. Let's see the beginning. Okay, there was the beginning of a chapter. It's a little discreet. It does not jump out at you at all, does it? That big gap in that line, that's all you got. Really, when I noticed it going by, was more this big gap over here than I did the chapter header. Again, you just have a larger font or make it bold. I don't know that that's a huge burden on the printer. So it is a little bit larger here, but it's not doesn't stand out the most. And sometimes they'll put the page number in a different spot on the start of the chapter, like out here, so it's easier to find. And this one has not chosen to do that. I don't know. I love Ignatius Press, so these are some unusual choices to me. I don't know if they were prohibited from doing that. They didn't have... the glossary was prepared by Doubleday, who must have done the edition before that, and that may explain some of these choices. And here they do use bolding for the word, and then the definition is not bolded. Again, this is not super clearly marked, so if you're going to be reading this book a lot, you may want to get a tab, a little sticky tab, like one of these, and put it on the edge of that page so you know where the glossary is, so you can jump back to it. You could do that for the abbreviations as well. That may help you out to be able to flip to it. The bibliography, you're probably not going to use a whole lot, but it's back here. Look, see, it's not even a bigger type. So again, it's a little bit hard to find. And the bibliography is done a little bit differently. So it says, as explained in the foreword, this book presupposes historical, critical exegesis and makes use of its finding, but it seeks to transcend this method. A lot of people don't. They're like, oh, it's historical critical method, and they focus on that and don't realize that he's saying, yes, we use that, but that's not all we use. Use it to transcend this method and to arrive at a genuinely theological interpretation of the scriptural text. It is not the aim here to enter into the debates of historical critical research. I have therefore made no attempt to compile a comprehensive bibliography, which would in any case be impossible. The titles of the works cited in the book are briefly indicated in the text in parentheses, and this is the full bibliographical details given below. First of all, the following texts figure among the more important recent books on Jesus, and then it has a list of them with a small description. I will say some of these are annotated and some of these are not. Here's an example. So it says, like Joachim Nuka, Jesus von Nazareth, Balkstoff, and Gestalta. I can't pronounce that at all. Herder Freiberg, 1990. But the next one is by Klaus Berger, Jesus, Patlock, Munich, 2004. On the basis of thorough exegetical knowledge, the author presents the figure and the message of Jesus in dialogue with the questions of the present time. So some of them have some annotations and some do not. I cannot help that. Then chapter 1, it lists them. So they're not really footnoted, but there's a brief citation for them in the chapter, and then they're here in the back, the full citation. Do they appear to be alphabetical or anything? And I don't really see that. So they might be in the order that they're used. Is there anything after this? There is an index. Again, no use of bold that I see. Is this the last feature in the book? Yes, this is the last feature in the book. So I'll go ahead and show you this page a little bit more thoroughly. Right? So there is a topical index back here. Okay, ready to get into it just a little bit. Now, last time we just looked at the Beatitudes. What do you want to see? I wish the person had said what they really wanted to see. I've used this, honestly, we used a lot in my Lectio Divina class. We used the forward in the introduction to give us a basis to do Lectio Divina, to understand a lot about the different kinds of commentaries that are out there, the different methods they use to study the Bible. And so we used a lot of that text and not as much of the book. But once you have the book open, you tend to go and read it more and more, even if you're just studying those methods. And that is a very worthwhile section to read, whether you intend on reading the next or not. Let's look at a little bit on page 1, the initial reflection on the mystery of Jesus. The book of Deuteronomy contains a promise that is completely different from the messianic hope expressed in other books of the Old Testament. Yet it is of decisive importance for understanding the figure of Jesus. The object of this promise is not a king of Israel and a king of the world, a new David, in other words, but a new Moses. Moses himself, however, is interpreted as a prophet. The category prophet is seen here as something totally specific and unique in contrast to the surrounding religious world, something that Israel alone has in this particular form. This new and different element is a consequence of the uniqueness of the faith in God that was granted to Israel. In every age, man's questioning has focused not only on his ultimate origin, almost more than the obscurity of his beginnings. What preoccupies him is the hiddenness of the future that awaits him. Man wants to tear aside the curtain. He wants to know what is going to happen so that he can avoid perdition and set out towards salvation. Religions do not aim merely to answer the question about a province. All religions try in one way or another to lift the veil of the future. They seem important precisely because they impart knowledge about what is to come, and so show the man the path he has to take to avoid coming to grief. This explains why practically all religions have developed a ways of looking into the future. Okay, you can see right away my main critique of the book. Is it completely accessible to anyone? Probably not. Is it so deeply theological that you need to have at least one master's degree to read it? No, I would honestly put this at advanced high school. Now, if you were homeschooled in a classical education program, this book, I think, would be at a perfect level for you for the rest of your life, honestly. Or if you've attended a classical liberal arts Catholic college, such as Christendom College, or for the homeschool group Mother of Divine Grace. I think this book would be completely appropriate level for you. I would not recommend this as somebody's first introduction to Catholicism if they have no theological knowledge. And yet somebody may find it completely beautiful as an introductory. It just wouldn't be my first go-to. I think you'd want a little bit more. You might get lost in the background. But the nice thing about this one is it does tell you the research methods and goes into that in the forward in the introduction. So if you have somebody who's fairly intellectual that you want to bring into the faith, or you want to help explore the faith, they may enjoy having that discussion. Not many catechism books or Introduction to Catholicism. Oh, well, that's awkward. We'll look at that later if we haven't looked at that before. I don't know that a lot of them go into giving you that context of biblical research first. This book lays it all out for you, and that is one of its great strengths. Let's read from another passage, of course, much further in. We read from the Beatitudes before. Again, frustrated because I can't just look at the top of the page. Here we are. I've found a subheading. Yeah, it's so easy to see. Again, a little critique there. So the principal Johannine, I can't say that, Johannine, the principal images in anything written by John. This one is on water. Water is the primordial element of life and is therefore also one of the primordial symbols of humanity. It appears to man in various forms and hence with various meanings. The first form is the spring, water that bursts forth fresh from the womb of the earth. The spring is origin, beginning, in its as yet unclouded and unspent purity. The spring thus figures as a truly creative element, as well as being a symbol of fruitfulness, of maternity. How is this translated book? This was written in German, I'm very sure. How is it still poetry in English? Beautiful, right? Was that not beautiful? Let me double check that. This was originally published. Okay, it says it was published by the Libera Editrice Vaticana. So it was published by the Vatican at the same time it was published in Germany. So, and then there was an English translation later. So yeah, this was not the original language. Can I just read you that again? That was poetry. Water. Water is the primordial element of life and is therefore also one of the primordial symbols of humanity. It appears to man in various forms, and hence with various meanings. The first form is the spring, water that bursts forth fresh from the womb of the earth. The spring is origin, beginning, in its as yet unclouded and unspent purity. The spring thus figures as a truly creative element, as well as being a symbol of fruitfulness, of maternity. It then goes on to the second form, which is flowing water, the final form being the sea. And then it says, but let us now turn from these general remarks about water symbolism and religious history to the Gospel of John. Water symbolism pervades the gospel from the beginning to the end. We meet it for the first time in Jesus' conversion with Nicodemus in chapter 3. In order to be able to enter the kingdom of God, man must be made new. He must become another person. He must be born again of the water and the Spirit, referencing John 3:5. What does this mean? Baptism, the gateway into communion with Christ, is being interpreted for us here as rebirth. This rebirth, by analogy with natural birth from the begetting of the man and the conception of the woman, involves a double principle, God's Spirit and water, the universal mother of natural life, which grace raises up in the sacrament to be a sister image of the virginal Theotokos. See what I mean? Completely accessible and yet not. It's like beautiful poetry and high theology and accessible language all met somehow. I can't really explain this book. Again, I don't know that I'd give it to children, but I may read passages to them. It is truly beautiful. Let's just jump and find something else. I'm on page 310. At this point, Jesus' relation to the figure of Moses, as well as the differences between the two, become apparent. As he came down from the mountain, Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone because he had been talking with God. Exodus 34:29-35. Because Moses has been talking with God, God's light streams upon him and makes him radiant. But the light that causes him to shine comes upon him from the outside, so to speak. Jesus, however, shines from within. He does not simply receive light, but he himself is light from light. Oh, friends, it is such a beautiful book. I really hope you get the chance to read this. Friends, may God bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. And may the good Lord bless you in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.